We have interpretation available in Portuguese, Russian, and in Spanish. So please choose from the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen which language you prefer. All good. So just a few words of introduction from me. The session today is organised by the Foundation for Developing Compassion and Wisdom. FDCW is a non-profit and dedicated to a kinder, wiser and more compassionate world. And I'm Victoria Coleman, and I'm the Executive Director of FDCW. Welcome. The session is going to last for 60 minutes. And here's a little bit about FDCW. It offers training, courses and resources for developing a warmer heart and a wiser mind. The content we use is rooted in wisdom of Buddhist philosophy and psychology, as well as modern psychology and sciences of the mind, such as neuroscience. So our approach uncovers a deeper understanding of our mind, our inner world, our emotions, and our outer reality, and how these are all interconnected. So by understanding how our own mind works on a more deeper level, we can develop a compassionate and caring attitude towards ourselves, which then naturally will be towards others as well. Over time and with gradual training, this attitude can become stable and unwavering, and it can bring us joy. So this is the second wisdom dialogue in a 6-part series. The first dialogue, which took place in February, was on how to become your own therapist and was with Venerable Rubina Corton, and you can watch that on our website. But today's wisdom dialogue is on the nature of the mind. So how do we go about understanding exactly how our mind works and why does that matter? Here to tell us all about that is Martin Ström, who's joining us today. So I just want to say a few words about Martin. The first Martin, back in Germany 5 years ago, he is the founder of Yeshe Norbu Mind Training Center in Sweden, and also the founder of Potential Project in Sweden. He has a background as an entrepreneur in information technology, and he holds a master's degree in computer science. However, after discovering the power of meditation more than 20 years ago, he changed direction. And he got a master's degree in psychology and studied Buddhist philosophy and psychology. So armed with these skills, he spent the last decade as a leadership and organizational consultant and keynote speaker to help foster more mindfulness, selflessness, and compassion within companies using the power of mind training. Martin is also the co-author of 3 books. These are I'm Sorry You Were Saying, The Mind of the Leader, and Fokus på Huvudet in Swedish. I'm confident I did not say that properly. Apologies, I don't speak Swedish. Martin's also serving as the one of the trustees on the board of FDCW. So I'm absolutely delighted to have a speaker of Martin's caliber joining us today, and I'm really looking forward to our session. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you so much. You did fine with the Swedish. I think most Swedes would have got that.
You're kind. Okay, so let's dive in. We're going to talk about the nature of the mind. So I thought a good place to start might be to ask, what is mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was just thinking before we started that as you mentioned, I have a master's degree in psychology, and I'm a licensed psychologist. But through the 5 years or so of studies of psychology, we were never even once, I think, really encouraged to look at our own minds. It was more about other people's behavior and psychological disorders and this and the other. But there was never any encouragement to look at our own minds in any structured way, and also in psychology and neuroscience, and there's nowhere to be found a definition of what mind actually is. And I will also, throughout this, I'll be using consciousness, awareness, kind of as synonyms for mind. But in Western science, there is really no definition. And if you don't even have a definition for something, you won't even be looking for it. So so all the understanding I have really about what the mind is comes from Buddhist psychology, and also the Dalai Lama, he's had conversations now for 40 years with scientists, modern physics and neuroscience and biology, and he has a great appreciation for science, but he was at some point he was asked, so over those 40 years of conversations with scientists, what have you learned from that about the nature of mind? And he said nothing. But he's learned a great deal of other things, and he's really excited about quantum mechanics and all sorts of things. But yeah, so the Buddhist definition of mind, the technical definition, so to speak, is that mind is clear and knowing, or luminous and cognizant, which means the same thing. And the clear aspect means that things arise in the mind, like the mind illuminates things like perceptions and thoughts, and so things pop up in our mind. So that's the knowing, or sorry, the clear or luminous aspect. And then the knowing or cognizant aspect is that we then become aware of these things, or we can become aware of them. We're not, there's a lot of things going on in the mind that we are unaware of, and that's part of the reason why you want to start looking at your mind. But so one way of maybe thinking about it is to view the mind as kind of like a stage in a theater. So you're sitting there in the audience, and there's this stage, and actors appear, and props appear, and these intricate stories unfold. So the mind is kind of like that. So consciousness would be like the stage. It's like the space of awareness where things manifest, or we can become aware of things, lots of things. And really, we're never ever aware of anything outside of our own minds, which is also an interesting insight. All we have is really appearances to mind. So being or cultivating an ability to start to observe that space of mind, that's theater stage, and just all the thoughts and emotions and impulses and perceptions that arise there. I would say that might be the most life-changing skill that we can pick up, and that's definitely something that we can train and cultivate. So maybe that's, I don't know, does that sound like a good intro to what the mind might be?
It's a great definition. It's wonderful. I've also heard the definition of like the sky. So your mind is like a blue sky, clear, and then you get these thoughts that are like clouds that come across, which you kind of chase, and then the clouds dissolve, and then the blue sky appears again. But I think that's a great definition, and I like the use of the actors on the stage. That's quite a visual image, which I really love. Before we joined this session today, Martin, we talked a bit about happiness and how understanding the nature of our mind could actually contribute to our longer term happiness. Do you want to say a little bit about that and what your journey was in terms of being materialistic and then changing your view on what happiness was?
Yeah. So when I was young, I was I guess you could call it a materialist, or even to use a derogatory term for myself, a bit of a hedonist, meaning that I thought that I actually had this saying that was, if you don't think that money can buy happiness, you simply don't know where to shop. But then so there was actually a really specific moment in my life. So this was I was on a beach in Thailand with my wife Maria, who's still my wife, and she had bought a book called The Art of Happiness, where a psychologist interviews His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And this book really changed a lot of how I viewed reality, I guess, myself and other people. So, I said I was a materialist and a hedonist. It's not entirely true. I was interested in, things like philosophy and religion, and I came from a natural sciences background, so I was really interested in philosophy and science and things like that. But the thing that really struck me when I read this book was that actually happiness is a state of mind. So it's, we run around and we try to rearrange all the things in the outside, get the perfect career and get the nice stuff and the best possible partner and yeah, so those things they do bring happiness, but it's conditioned happiness. It never lasts. You get your iPhone and then suddenly your screen is scratched, or you have the iPhone 14 and then the iPhone 15 comes out and there goes that happiness, because now you need to have the other one, and so on and so forth. So you can't really become happy in any stable or endurable fashion by satisfying your senses, good food and whatnot. But rather what you can do is you can develop inner qualities like contentment and patience, or love and compassion towards yourself and others, generosity. And by doing that, you actually create the conditions for what you might call genuine happiness, a happiness that is not conditional on specific outer circumstances, a happiness that is stable and lasting, and that you always bring with you, even in when life is hard. So you can be the richest person in the world. I read about this Korean guy who was in real estate and built like the tallest building in Seoul or something, and then he was just so depressed, so he walked up on top of it and jumped off because he just killed himself. And he had so much money, so much fame, so much adulation, everything. And then you read about people who and even endure time in concentration camps. Like there's this famous book by an author called Viktor Frankl, and there's stories out of Tibet where Tibetan meditation masters have been in concentration camps, and they somehow remained happy throughout these just horrendous experiences. So there's nothing more important than cultivating the mind and these inner qualities, because we all want to be happy. And also, I don't think I recently had this conversation with my daughter, and she's been talking to her friends. So people also don't realize, I think, what happiness actually means, and like the extent to which happiness can be cultivated, and how a joyful and serene human being actually can be if the mind is cultivated to its full potential. We can see it, if we observe someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, who seems to be extremely joyful, even though his country has been obliterated and he's been forced into exile. It's not that he doesn't lack compassion. He will cry when he hears the story of someone, their hardship and so on. But there's always this underlying sense of well-being that kind of encapsulates even these difficult parts of life. So that's what you can get out of truly cultivating the mind and understanding the mind.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I was going to turn to a slightly different point now, which is about anxiety. I myself find myself a lot more anxious than I used to be, say, a few years ago before COVID. And I find it in people I meet and family members, this rising levels of anxiety and more medication to help people with anxiety and stress. And so what I've been doing is try to focus more on my breath. I read this book about breathing, and I sort of went to try to take it right back to basics and how I was working with my breath and how I was breathing, and as a way to kind of slow down my constant stream of thoughts and sort of galloping with the mind into sort of anxious things that can happen, things that can go wrong. And it reminded me of a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who said, if we create space, the mind can relax. This is important because when the mind is anxious and restless, we can't use our intelligence clearly. So the solution is to work on creating a deeper sense of peace within yourself. Can you say a little bit more about anxiety and meditation, how those two might go together, or what advice you have around anxiety, say?
Yeah, so I mean, there's really several parts to that question, and well, one really obvious thing is that we live in a world where our attention is always being challenged and pulled in a million directions, and even when people stayed home during COVID, you have people, they're working in their beds and they have their computer in their lap, and they're not just working, so you have probably a few social media and a little YouTube going. And anyways, I mean, we all recognize, and your mobile phone is there, and there are notifications, and just this constant onslaught. And so the very first thing that we can do is to start to cultivate the mind's ability to be just truly focused and stable. And yeah, so that would be the first step, because the second step is to start to observe the mind and understand what's actually going on, and like His Holiness said in your quote, to create that space where we maybe also don't identify so strongly with every silly thing that pops into our head. There's a scary thought and then immediately there's anxiety, but that's just because we buy into that scary thought. We identify it, we believe in it. If we just watch it as you also said before, as a cloud passing through the sky, then it doesn't even have to affect us, because I mean 95% of what just pops into our mind is useless garbage, I would say. At least that's true for my mind. Maybe for someone else's as well. So but in order to be able to start to observe our minds, we need to first calm our minds and make it a bit more stable, so that we can gain that clarity, gain more a more relaxed, so we're more comfortable in that neighborhood of our own minds. Cultivate, and that's that would be like the function of mindfulness meditation, is to cultivate the faculties of attention and focus, but in a way that's really relaxed and stable, and then brings that clarity. But then there's a third really interesting facet to specifically anxiety, and it's that the one of the best ways of working with anxiety is actually to face the things that we fear. So it's if you get thrown off the horse, you need to get back onto the horse, otherwise you become more and more afraid of horses. And it's kind of like the same with what I think happened with a lot of people during COVID, is that you don't have a lot of social interactions. And I met so many people who develop anxiety and they get fearful, and then they stop doing things, they avoid things. And while you do that, then your fear will increase, and then you avoid even more, and then you get more fear. So both, just engaging with things both in the external world, but also engaging with the scary things in your own mind, and not try to suppress them or avoid them or run from them. That's also very important, specifically when it comes to anxiety.
That's really helpful. Yeah, thank you. It strikes me as you talk about this, it's a gradual process, because it doesn't. What we're really trying to do is change our mental habits. So like if we have a habit of being anxious or feelings of depression, it's not like we're going to change that overnight. It's a gradual process of reducing and de-identifying with those feelings. And that takes time. And as you said, it takes patience. And it's making me think of Larry Eshu's quote where he said, "Be wise, treat yourself and your mind sympathetically with loving kindness. If you're gentle with yourself, you'll become gentle with others, and don't push yourself." I mean, I love that quote because I often feel I'm hard on myself, and I think if I'm being hard on myself, I'm going to naturally be hard on other people. So what advice, because you're a counsellor and you've given therapy and training, do you find people are too hard on themselves, and why is that unhelpful?
Yeah, so this is somehow it's like the disease of the Western mind, I think. I've never lived in, say, Tibetan community or traditional any Eastern culture, but they don't seem to have what we have, which is this like deep-seated self-hatred and tendency to be so harsh and hard on ourselves, and also this hard perfectionism where it's like we feel that we need to well, first of all, we definitely feel that we need to perform, we need to be better and faster and all of those things, but also we think we need to do it by being hard on ourselves. And it's like, and maybe this is a silly example, but say you're training a dog, and if you try to get that dog to do what you want by yelling at it and threatening it, beating it, I mean, you can get the dog to kind of do what you want, but everyone who's ever tried to train a dog or seen a dog trainer see that the most efficient way is actually to care for the dog and to show love and affection to the dog and try to engage the dog's curiosity and playfulness and get it to work with you without force or coercion. So and the mind is a bit like that. If we try to beat the mind into submission and I'm so bad, I shouldn't this, I shouldn't that, then that's a really poor strategy. But if we can treat ourselves with more kindness and care, concern, be more and try to engage our enthusiasm and curiosity, and that's going to be a much better, even if you want to be the best performer at anything, that's still a better strategy than perfectionism and self-loathing and beating yourself up all the time.
Yeah, it reminds me of what Thupten Jinpa once said in a compassion course about Westerners find it really hard to be compassionate towards themselves. They feel like that's wrong. Actually, we should be giving our compassion and our love to others, but if I give it to myself, that's wrong. I shouldn't be doing that. It's just the wrong thing to do. Can you say a little bit about when those feelings come? What advice you have around that?
Yeah, I think first of all, we can just think about how we would treat, if a really good friend came to us and this good friend told us that, I really screwed up. I did this wrong and I didn't get that result, and I'm feeling really horrible, or this terrible thing happened to me. Then, we would treat that friend with kindness. We would listen to them. We would be loving towards them. But then suddenly, when it's if it's not that friend, but when it's ourself experiencing these things, suddenly it's like being compassionate to ourselves is not okay. I don't know if it's a weakness or I don't know, but we don't treat ourselves like we would treat that friend, and at least consider that to be a possibility, that possibility to be our own best friend and really generate that love and care and compassion towards ourselves. And another I think another metaphor that I really like is that of if you have a frightened child, this child is just really freaking out, and then you don't yell at that child, you don't try to subdue it or hit it and tell it to be quiet. Well, if you do, you're a really horrible person, but any normal person would try to soothe them and caress the child and tell them it's okay, and really help them to calm down. And our mind is sometimes like that freaked out, frantic child. And the way we need to treat our mind in those situations is like that child, metaphorically put our mind in our lap and just, it's okay, you're all right. And be soothing and calming and caring and compassionate towards ourselves. Yeah. So I don't know if that's
really helpful. Thank you. I love that analogy. Yeah, treating ourselves with more kindness. Can we move on now to how is it you think that understanding our mind more deeply and how our mind works is going to be strengthening our compassion? So how does it add to one? So in other words, if you understand your mind more deeply, does that help you be more compassionate to yourself and to others? I guess what you're getting at is you're kind of more in contact with your own pain and the lack of control that you have over your mind. And like often I'll find myself thinking, I don't want to be thinking these thoughts. I don't want to be experiencing these emotions. But, I am. So, and I guess a lot of other people are as well. So recently I had an experience when I was in a hospital with a close family friend, and I was really worried about them. I was really quite upset. And then I started looking around the hospital and think, well, there are loads of other people here experiencing the same or perhaps even worse than them. And it actually helped. Do you know what I mean? Sort of like not just my problem, but then extending it out to others who are experiencing the same. Can you empathize with that? Or?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, if we start to understand our own minds more deeply, then we can start to see what are the true causes of suffering for ourselves. So if our minds are dominated by greed and hatred and jealousy and aversion, then that's a really terrible state to be in. It is the true cause of so much suffering. And also it will control our behavior. We all have said things that, we say them and then 1 second later we regret saying them. And so it's when really strong anger, for example, arises, we are under control of that anger and we say things that, if we were calm and collected, we wouldn't have said them. And, from a neurophysiological perspective, that's like the fight-flight response of the reptilian brain. Neuroscientists would say that, our frontal cortex is not in the game, but we're driven by these rather base impulses. And then we really mess up and we create suffering for ourselves and others. So, but when we start to see those mechanisms and also start to see that, okay, if I understand anger more, I can be less of a hostage of it. Anger might still arise, but we can create some space around it, and maybe over time cultivate more patience and so on. But then, if we see that in ourselves, then we see also that when other people are behaving badly, it's not because they're a bad person. It's not like no one wakes up in the morning and thinks, oh, what am I going to do today? Yes, I'm going to be a real pain in the butt for as many people as possible and really be mean and terrible. No, it's because they're like under the sway, they're like kidnapped by anger and jealousy and so on in their minds. So and if we see that, then we can understand better what's going on, and we can empathize more with their situation, and we can also understand that the pain that I see in my mind when I'm suffering, that's exactly the same pain that this person is experiencing. So the deeper we understand our own minds and how it functions, the deeper we can also understand other people's minds and be more tolerant and forgiving and compassionate towards them.
They can actually expand our compassion as we become aware of our own, as you say, suffering and the suffering of others.
Yeah. And there's a direct correlation between wisdom and compassion, and wisdom in this regard, meaning truly understanding at a deep level how the mind functions. The deeper your wisdom is in that respect, the deeper your compassion will be for yourself as well as for others.
That's why we're the foundation for developing compassion and wisdom. Two wings of a bird. They support each other, I feel.
Yeah.
You've also spent a lot of time working in corporate environment and working with people in the workplace. And can you talk a little bit about how the power of the mind can be best harnessed and used in a leadership context?
I think as a leader, it gets even more important to have an understanding of your own mind. So, and that, when I say understand your own mind, that also means understanding the full range of things that motivate you, the whatever impulses that drive your behavior, and also all these mechanisms that I just talked about. Because as a leader, you really need to be aware of how you're perceived by others, how you act towards others, and you need to make sure that your motivation, ideally, as a leader, you want your motivation to be as selfless as possible, so that you act in the best interest of your, the person you have in front of you, or the team, or your organization. I mean, as a leader, you're there for those people, for that organization. It's not about you. So you need to be able to develop that type of authenticity and selflessness, and also, to the degree that you can develop compassion and kindness, that's the same. You're going to be a better leader to the same extent that you can develop those inner qualities. So because as a leader, you have a huge impact on, you can talk about your random president or, leader of countries. If someone's mind is controlled by fear and greed and anger and delusion, then they can really mess things up. And, there's a war going on in Ukraine because, someone has too much greed in their mind, I think, and a little bit too little selflessness and compassion. And that's on the biggest possible scale. But even, whatever you're the leader of, if you don't understand your mind, you're just going to create suffering for yourself and others. And it's just it's amplified when you have power over other people.
How important is it to be a good listener when you're leading? Because I think that's one of my weaknesses. I am not a good listener, and I'm conscious, always reminding myself to listen to my team and not just project my ideas and my views and me. I think this is what we should do. Have you come across that? You've been advice around that, listening skills?
Yeah, definitely. And I when you said that, I was reminded about this. I was coaching a leader, I guess you can call it, and we were discussing what's sometimes called beginner's mind, or the importance of cultivating this ability to see things as they truly are. Like a child or a beginner will see, when they see something, they see it for the first time, and then they're paying attention and they're seeing what's really there. But then, after a while, we stop seeing the actual things and we just see our own projections. So we and this leader had a person that would come into their office and just complain all the time, and they felt that they were just going on about the same old things all the time, just nagging, blah blah blah. And so I encouraged that person to instead, and meet this person as if for the first time, and then truly just listen and pay attention and see what they're actually saying, and not, because they weren't relating to actual person in front of them, just their own stereotypical biased idea of, we all had this sense of, we know exactly what they're going to say, and same old. But so when they did that, the whole situation just changed like that, because there were some valid points in there, and they hadn't been listened to. So when the leader started to pay attention, then this person could relax and open up, and then this really wonderful dialogue could unfold. So yeah, if we're not aware that most of the time we're just relating to our own projections, then we're not being curious, we're not listening, we're not paying attention. It's like we're walking around in our own little matrix with no outside input sometimes, and that's not very helpful.
And also makes you more isolated, because I feel like that's an issue for us as well these days, is loneliness and isolation is increasingly a problem in the modern world, maybe due to the conditions of COVID and people, living in lockdown and then just not getting out again. But we see ourselves as separate from the world around us and from other people and even from our planet. And so how do we start to deconstruct these mistaken perceptions, like you are there and I'm here and we're completely unrelated? How do we see more interdependence or connection between one another? Do you have any advice around that one?
Yeah, and that's actually a really really deep thing, because one from how to put this, so one of the most fundamental things that we're missing about reality is that everything is interconnected. Everything is affecting everything else, and everything that we are is arising from different causes and conditions. And you can see it at so many levels. I'm obviously the result of generations of human beings. I'm a result of the culture I grew up in, and so on and so forth. And all my actions influence others, and I'm deeply influenced by the actions of others. And this goes really, really deep. But just at that very practical level, we are completely interdependent, but we never see that. We see ourselves as separate and like these concrete, separate things that have nothing to do with other people, the rest of the world. Like we feel like we could really separate ourselves from the rest of reality, but we can't, because we're just this conglomeration of causes and conditions. But I think one way of seeing this, if we talk about observing the mind more directly, is so this, you could do this as kind of a meditation. If you're observing your mind and then just observe, for example, something like a sound. So if you watch this sound, is that sound an external thing? Is it happening outside, or is it an internal thing? Is it something that's arising in my mind? So is the sound in me, or is it outside of me, or is it somewhere in between? Is it both, neither? So, but if you start to look for this, the border between inside and outside, you can't really find it. There is no border. So this very notion of what's inside me and what's outside me, it's actually that in itself is just a projection. And I realized that this is maybe so deep that it sounds flaky, but that kind of meditation can really start to soften the borders between what's in here and what's out there. So that's maybe one way of I don't know, loosening that strong sense of being this independent, separate thing in the world.
Yeah, and maybe opening our having the courage to open our hearts a little bit more to other people and what they're experiencing. Which I really feel that's what it's all about, is becoming more courageous of heart and having more closer connection and having affection and caring for one another. I think that's what's going to make a difference in our world. And I know that's what His Holiness advocates for all the time. But I just want to bring in questions from the audience. Now, I know Martin's going to lead us in a meditation in about 5 minutes' time before we wrap up. Does anybody have any questions on what we've discussed so far? Any comments they'd like to make? Please just use the icon or the button here to raise your hand. I think it's the reactions one. If you want to raise your hand, does anybody have a question or a comment for Martin? No? Nobody has? Oh, yes. Delia Weisman. I'm sorry if I pronounced it. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. First, thank you for such interesting things that you've said. I would like to ask about anger. There's always the question about the fact that we do need anger in order to understand what is important for us, or if something is done unjustly and we want to correct it. And on the other hand, it's not good to be angry. So where's the border here? How do you know that when your anger is good, it's fruitful, and when it is it destroys things? And is it good to get rid of anger completely? And so, can you comment on that? Thank you.
Wow, was that 5 minutes? Just yeah, this is thank you. That's a really good question. I think in terms of anger, there is certain anger which is just really bad, and that's, you know, when it's malice and hatred and like this afflicted anger, and that's never going to be helpful. It's just toxic. But then, like you said, there's the anger that arises when we see injustices and, you know, ourselves or others are being treated unfairly and so on. And I think so if you, that kind of anger, if you were to look at it as it's happening and go deeper, you would see that at the bottom there's actually this like this discerning wisdom that can tell right from wrong, and there's this like sharpness and clarity to that anger, which is really which is very helpful, and it's actually a good thing, I would say. And then there's this energy to anger that, you know, can kind of help us act or things like that. But as His Holiness the Dalai Lama often says, that anger is very tricky. So it's sometimes it can be helpful, and sometimes it can kind of backfire on us. So what I think though is super important is that whatever the emotion is that arises, the first thing is to be aware of it. Because if we're unaware, then anger or any emotion can take us into really unfortunate places and situations. So if anger arises, we don't want to, because there's two extremes. One extreme is to suppress it, you know, pretend it's not there, and I'm such a holy person, I don't get angry, blah blah blah. Then it just kind of pop up somewhere else, and so suppression is not good. But also acting out, just, you know, I'm just off I go, triggered by anger. That's also not often helpful. So, but if we can just see the anger and be aware, okay, here it is, and then listen to it, and if we say that, yeah, this actually makes sense, and I need to speak up for myself, or I need to put my foot down, and, you know, I need to be strong and forceful, then we just go ahead and we go ahead and be forceful. We might even yell at someone, or, you know, whatever. But there's this wisdom that kind of is along for the ride, so that we know that this is actually wise. And sometimes we can, if it's not just we're not just acting out of self-interest, but we're actually helping the other person by being forceful, for example. So yeah, but seeing clearly and bringing awareness to our anger, I think that's the most important thing. And definitely, any anger that's afflicted, like malice, hatred, pettiness, those things I think we can transform over time, because they're definitely not useful. So we should cultivate love and compassion and kindness to kind of try to counteract those aspects.
Is that helpful, Dalia?
Very much, very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we kind of run out of time now. I'd like to thank Martin so much for all his wisdom and advice and tips he shared today. I've learned so much. I've really enjoyed listening to you, Martin. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's joined us today for this wisdom dialogue. And if you feel you've benefited, please consider making a donation to FDCW on our website. We are a nonprofit, and we'd like to be able to offer more of these dialogues and webinars and events that benefit others. So we're going to close out today with a short meditation for the remaining time we have, led by Martin on the nature of the mind. So over to you, Martin. And again, thanks so much for joining us today.
Yay. So the first thing about meditation is people ask me, should I have my eyes open or closed? And I guess you can do whatever is most comfortable. So let's say we close our eyes, and then see if you can find posture that's kind of embodying wakefulness and alertness, but at the same time is relaxed. So you want to have a straight back, but you also want to relax your shoulders and let your hands rest where it feels comfortable. See if you can relax the muscles of your face. Just gently release and let go of any tension that might be there. Allowing your attention to initially just drop down from your head into your body, becoming aware of the fact that we are embodied. We spend so much of our time in our head, worrying, fixing, planning. Let's see if we can come down with our awareness into our body. Maybe become aware of the breathing. Just feeling the sensations of air flowing in and out of the body. You can rest your attention on the breath, kind of like a piece of cork bobbing up and down the surface of the ocean, following the rhythm of the waves. Breathing in, breathing out. And then we can go from that more focused attention on the breath, and allow our attention, our awareness to become more broad, more open, more panoramic. So, as in the metaphors we introduced in the beginning, the metaphor of a stage in a theater, or the metaphor of a clear blue open sky. See if you can watch your mind in that way. And everything that arises in the mind, that comes into the space of awareness, that would be thoughts and memories, sounds, emotions, tactile sensations from the body. And whatever it is, see if you can just watch it, observe it. Like that person sitting in the audience of the theater and watching actors and props appear. You don't run up on stage and engage with the actors and try to have them do this or that or the other, or go away. No, you're just sat in the audience watching. See if you can bring to this experience a sense of curiosity and interest, of warmth and openness. So whatever comes up, everything is welcome. Maybe a thought comes that triggers irritation or sadness or joy. Just see them come, stay for a while, and then melt away. And sometimes you'll find that you've been kidnapped by a thought. It's like the thought has thrown you in the trunk of his car and drove off to somewhere in the past or the future, and you just, off we go. So if that has happened, see if you can just gently bring your attention back. Broaden your awareness. And allow whatever arises to arise. And to round off this short meditation, I will just encourage you to maybe bring this kind of exercise into daily life. Let's say you're standing in the line at the supermarket, and your queue is moving much slower than all the other ones, because that's always what happens. So if you can take that opportunity to, instead of just be annoyed and irritated with what's going on around you. See if you can just turn your gaze inwards. So you follow a few breaths and then you open up your awareness to whatever is happening in your mind, watching all these stories and thoughts and ideas and emotions and impulses. Kind of like being a scientist of your own mind. Maybe you spend 30 seconds or 5 minutes. But doing that a few times per day can really have a huge impact on your whole experience. It might create a greater sense of ease and spaciousness. It might make things less heavy. So yeah, that's an encouragement from you, or from me to you, to bring this kind of exercise, this habit of watching the mind just into daily life. Because it can really have a big impact. Okay, and with that, we can open up our eyes and again turn our gaze and our attention outward and re-engage with the rest of our days, with wherever you are. I'm in Australia, so I'm at the end of my day. Some of you are at the beginning of yours, so I wish you a really good one.
Thank you so much, Martin. And thank you everyone for joining us. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.